Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. A bunch of things to get to today. I'm going to get into the press secretary's marriage, or the age gap, that whole thing, similar to Kamala's situation with that one guy. And I have this. I don't want to call it a guilty pleasure, um, where I really enjoy the liberals freaking out over Trump, and even with how much Trump's turned out to be a complete POS, that I turned on the news and they're all going nuts that Trump and Elon Musk are destroying the bureaucracy. And I know some of it's really bad. I mean, I've reconciled that our country's going to implode, that our country's going to, it's just, it's, yeah, our whole, it's not just our country, it's the whole thing. Like the whole thing that we're doing right now as human beings, our construct of our social construct, religious construct, our, what we wake up in the morning and think we're entitled to in our lives, the materialism, the internet, all of it, right? This whole thing isn't working. It's taken us in the wrong direction. I think everybody can kind of agree with this on some level. The idea of idiocracy is present, but also how immoral it's making people, the destruction of the family, taking people away from God, how mentally ill people are, how depressed the kids are, how depressed everybody is, how, the medications and the system and the corruption. And, it's a mess. The whole system's a mess, right? And it's making human beings worse. Like we're worse now. Each generation is worse than the generation before. So the system has to come down. It can't be fixed. It can't be changed because there's too much money involved. Like I said, every 4 years, every 2 years, in terms of the congressional elections, but every 4 years in terms of the presidential elections, these two criminal organizations get to, one of the two is going to be in charge of, and they're going to both be in charge of some of it, but one's going to be dominant, is going to be in charge of $5 trillion in tax revenue, it's an obscene amount of money, and then all the lobbying money and all these other things that they're going to get, and the power to, the military power and all these things. Criminal organizations will go into, the Democrat and the Republican Party will go in and take over these, will be given the reins to this beast of a system, and will be able to profit and manipulate things and, force their worldview on, I mean, not only Americans, but other countries. I mean, the whole thing, right? And so, when you have that level of power, you have that level of, we've gone too far away from, what we are as a soul, what we are as spiritual beings. So the system is going to collapse like it is. So I've accepted that. Like it has to collapse. It's probably going to happen in my lifetime, whatever that means, and it's going to be ugly. And Trump is totally opening the door to that. But, if it wasn't him, it'd be somebody else. And so, there's blame to go around, but the blame is on all of us. Like it's just, And in that, they're taking a sledgehammer to the American system. So I turned on the news, and all the liberals are freaking out. I even just turned it on now. It's Super Bowl week, so I was on ESPN, and it's 10 o'clock. I just ate breakfast. I was wrapping up breakfast at 10 o'clock, and I already did a voiceover for the Journey series this morning. It was Sunday, February 8th. And ESPN started their Super Bowl show at 10 a.m. It's the game isn't on until 6 p.m. Right? Like, what could you possibly have to talk about that hasn't been said all season and all week? It's an interesting day because, all this energy is put into football. People's favorite teams, and whether they had a losing season, a winning season, and they had, players excelled or they regressed or, whatever happened, injuries, big games. It comes down to this one game and these two teams. And I don't care about either of these two teams. Like, I'm not fans of either one of them. I guess that Saquon Barkley seems like a good person, and he's having an epic year, and he's had some incredible runs, and he jumped backwards over some dude spinning and all that shit that he did, right? So I'd like to see him do well, whatever, and I'd like to see the Chiefs lose because of the whole, I don't think it's going to happen, and then the whole commercials, and it's just a decadent day. And when I was in my sports heyday, when sports was the center of my existence, from the time I was like in high school through, my college years and my early 20s when I played a lot of basketball and other sports. and I watched a lot of sports. The Super Bowl was a disappointment year in and year out. The NFC was so much better than the AFC. The 4 years when Buffalo lost the Super Bowl, but it was more than just that. It was like 10 years where the AFC couldn't produce a team that could compete in the Super Bowl. Like the NFC Championship was really the Super Bowl. The Buffalo Bills had a good team the first year that they lost to the Giants, but every other year after that they were overmatched, and they had this stigma of losing. I watched the 30 for 30 on the Buffalo Bills. It was called the Four Falls or whatever. They're right near Niagara Falls there, whatever it is. It was kind of interesting, but this Super Bowl was a disappointment, and they started to rig it, I think, and make it close and make it a game because they were just blowouts. Like the game was over by halftime, and people had waited, put all this energy into football for this one big day, Super Bowl parties, and the game was like a complete letdown. Like it was, it had no entertainment value. Like thank God they started to rig it, right? Because you can't have blowouts every year. Sometimes it was like 40-point wins and things, and so the game has to be competitive. I mean, for the advertisers themselves, they weren't producing a good product. And so it showed you how, people complain about things being rigged, but when they're not rigged, oftentimes they have no entertainment value at all. So they had to, sports has had to do things to make these games, these these championship type of things more competitive. But it's the number one watch TV event in America, and now it's global, and the whole thing is just it's obscene. Like it's the decadence and all of it, right? It's and it's just played out. Like how many Super Bowls do you need to see? Like what's going to be different about this one? Like how many you're gonna? I saw 100 Super Bowls, or whatever, 70 or whatever like your lifetime. Like it's just I mean it's there to be watched and there's a spectacle there, but like there's not how many champions? It's the same thing every year. Something with people get injured. There's some controversy, like all the sports pundits and all this stuff. There's more coverage of this shit than there is of like the media and the news and stuff. And so, all of those things. So going back to what I was saying, I'm flipping through the channels and I get to MSNBC. It's right before 10 o'clock, before the ESPN, the Super Bowl thing's going to come on. The other stations, the CNN and ESPN were running ads. And they're whining about how it isn't Trump's country or Elon Musk's country, and everyone should write their Congress people and stop them. And I'm like, no, they're not going to stop it, right? The Republicans are all in line until grocery prices, because of the tariffs or something else, go up. There's something that outrages the American people, and they blame Trump. Until that happens, they're just going to do whatever they're going to do. And some of it is like, there's something I watched a little bit of a news clip yesterday. And this woman was like, they've taken down this agency that's monitoring ISIS. ISIS is an American asset. Like, and I've explained how that is before. You either believe it or you don't. But there's goofy shit like that, right? A lot of the stuff, it's governmental waste. But some of the things, there's a lot of bad jobs. My brother was working for the state. He was working at this facility, and it was a state-run place. And I was with him. He was going in to pick something up at work. And it was early in the morning. And there's 4 guys, state workers there. And my brother screams out they heard him. Like he yelled it loud enough. He screams out his window, "Lean on each other till the shovels get here." Because, the state workers were known for, all the things that you would get a state job, in Connecticut. And, there was laws about being fired. Like he told me there was a guy that at the facility who was just stealing cases of toilet paper. And he was just going down the hall with cases of toilet paper, selling it to other people or, whatever it was, right? And he had been doing it for years and the supervisors didn't know, so they find out, they fire him. He's like a janitor or something, whatever it was. So the guy sues the state and he wins and they have to give him all his back money. And his defense was this. His lawsuit was this. No one told me I couldn't steal toilet paper. And so he gets his job back and they tell him don't steal stuff and they catch him again and fire him. And this time it's stuck. But, these state jobs and the federal jobs are like that, right? They're not, independent corporations they have stockholders to answer to, and it's a lot different than the government where you're spending the collective's money, right? Which I said earlier. That's why people like these governmental jobs, because there's not nearly as much oversight, and there's so much governmental waste of your tax dollars, and not only the tax dollars, but the debt that's being accrued with the national debt and all this stuff, right? And so, the stuff that they're doing, some of it's going to backfire. Like they're going to get rid of some agency or some people. Just it might be one person that's fucking putting their finger in there might be some, there's going to be these great people, really brilliant, essential people who have their fingers in the dike, and when they get fired, they take a finger out and the whole thing implodes, and nobody knows why. Nobody knows what they're doing, right? Like there's always people who are just like great, who are under the radar, who are doing good work and keeping an organization going or a country afloat. And they're going to get rid of some of those people or some of those agencies that are really doing good work because they're just taking a sledgehammer to everything, which is completely fucked. But watching the Democrats react is kind of great, right? It's the entertainment part of the Trump presidency is how the Democrats react to his, he's going full Trump and they can't do anything about it. Write your congressman. Like they're pleading with liberal people to write their congress people. And I'm like, yeah, it's just, you're this limp-dicked, right? And so it's kind of a great thing. The other thing I want to say, I want to do a follow-up. I was talking about how words don't matter. And I had these two comments that I read. And let me read the words one again here. Nope, that's not the... here it is. I heard Paul say a few times words don't matter. Is this based on the meditation or an opinion? Can you please possibly do a video relating to this? It would really interesting. It would be really interesting and helpful. I've had some weird interactions over my life where I met someone who told someone to kill themselves and the person did it. And for some reason, I remember that conversation for a few years, like it was important or something. And 5 years later, the same thing happened again. Someone said to a person who kept talking about suicide, why don't you make the decision already? And the person did it, the choice, and killed himself. So this is why I'm torn between words mattering and not mattering in terms of the system and meditation. I understand it's based off the samskaras of the person who was suicidal. And, that's what I believe, the samskaras, the thing. Samskaras are impressions that people take from life to life. And if you committed suicide in a previous life, you have those samskaras, and it's hard to break free. So you have to resist the temptation. It said the system of meditation, I understand it's based on samskaras of the person who was suicidal and not the person's fault who said the words. Like, should those people feel bad? Thanks for your videos, bro. And so I actually addressed this, but I wanted to say some more things about this, right? Because I said, of course you should feel bad if you say, to tell someone to kill themselves, you should feel bad. That should make you feel bad, right? When I was an asshole, or more of one, in my early 20s, when I just was a horrible person, punky and angry, I said really bad things to people, mean things. And, it was something that I had to, it just didn't go away. But as I matured, I was able to, you can see it's still there now. Like it's still, part of what I do. But it was way worse, right? And I would make it personal. Like when I say things here, some of the thoughts that can be really kind of harsh, truthful but harsh. I'm not saying personally to people. Like I wouldn't say things personally to people. Because I feel it in my heart. Like if I hurt somebody's heart, I would feel it, right? So I say things here. In the Sajmark system, when Babaji would criticize somebody, he would look at somebody else and say something. If he saw something like people would be sitting around him in a circle and he'd be smoking a hookah, and he saw that something that one of the people needed to be aware of, that he would, he would have to bring it to their consciousness. And he would tell a story to somebody. He wouldn't look directly at the person. And he would talk about, some, person who has so much anger, who has so much, some kind of deficiency in their character. And he hoped that he would say these things and the person would realize, hey, he's talking about me, but without talking about him. And then they would work to correct it. But if he looked at the guy and said, "Look, asshole, you do this, this, and this. You need to stop it," it wouldn't work because people then get defensive, they get angry, they get feel like a victim. All the things that people go through. So it's a very hard thing to do. We all have our ability to see flaws in other people, and or whatever things people need to work on, and telling them, like, I worked as a counselor and a therapist. I have a master's in counseling, and telling people doesn't work, right? How many times have you told somebody what a piece of shit they are, what they're doing wrong, and it had a positive effect? It just doesn't work. Like, that's why I don't argue with people. I don't debate them, because direct confrontation of somebody's stuff almost never works. I mean, it might work in terms of 2 years from now, they finally get it, right? Like planting suggestions, but doing something at a more subtle level where people's defense mechanisms don't kick in, like what Babaji did, is the better course of action, right? But anyways, I used to say things that would hurt people's feelings, and I kind of felt it, like not like I do now. And when I played basketball and we would lose, I would blame my teammates, and I would, say things about them, like get frustrated because, I was just a frustrated person failing at life. And my frustration would come out with adrenaline. It wasn't just me, it was other people. There's some things that it was a behavior that was exhibited on the basketball court. But when I would go to sleep at night, I would think about the things I said, and I was like embarrassed. Like I thought, the way I acted, and, it embarrassed me. Like I was like, wow, you're like a piece of shit. Like, I realized that it wasn't good. And I kind of understood there are things coming out because the adrenaline was going, or I was a little bit dehydrated, and anger was coming out, and I was not able to like hold it back. And so, it was a need for me I understood that I needed to change. And then later on, when I started doing the Sabotage system, it helps a person's heart become more sensitive. And you feel when you hurt other people's hearts, right? But it's not the words, it's the anger. Like if you tell somebody to go kill themselves, if you said it as a joke or whatever, or there was no energy behind it. But, everybody has layers in their psychological makeup. And I'm not talking about the world of psychology so much, the psychological model, the psychiatric model, the DSM-5 and those things. I'm talking about what really exists. And so, people have an inner dialogue. They have a self-perception. Like in the world of the psychology, people with borderline personality disorder believe deep down they're evil. There's something inside of them. Who knows what that comes from? Some samskara, like, whatever they are as a person. But they have this sense of they're evil, so they're trying to cover that up, and they do it in all these deviant ways. They do evil shit to cover up the fact that they're evil because they think they're evil because they don't want other people to think they're evil, right? And so let's say someone's suicidal. You have your baseline layer of your soul and who you are as a soul, right? And then you build the personality is built on top of that. And the personality has layers, right? So let's say somebody grows up with a mom that doesn't love them. And the reason they have that is because of some past life shit, that having a mom that can't love them, or sometimes as a parent, you just don't like your kids, right? You don't like one of them or all of them, or you just, some moms, certainly for dads, the maternal instinct doesn't kick in, and they just dislike their kids, and they're just like, resentful, and the kid doesn't feel loved, feels unwanted, and feels maybe even like disgusting, and like whatever, vile, like and if there's abuse and stuff like that, and so that self-assessment, what that person believes about themselves, also what they had is some scaras, and so a person thinks of themselves as disgusting, and they can grow up to be physically beautiful. They're physically beautiful to everyone else. But when they look in the mirror, they see a disgusting person. And then they do things to cover it up. They become narcissistic. They have this dialogue and tell themselves they're so great. All these types of things, right? And so this is what I'm talking about. There's layers. And so if you say something to somebody who feels this way about themselves, and they're suicidal already, or you just look at them, like, you look at one, you could give the same look to two different people. And the narcissistic person, the person thinks they're great, will say, oh, they must want me. They're looking at me. They must think how great I am. And the other person goes, oh, that person looked at me. And they'll see your face in in their expression, and they'll be like, oh, that person thinks I'm disgusting, because that's what the person thinks of themselves, right? And so whatever people have going on inside of them about what they believe about themselves, and then they interact with the world, and then the worst of it gets mirrored back, in the energy behind the words. And if you actually say something to the person and how that person's going to interpret it, and the energy, the words themselves and the energy behind it, right? If you have hatred, if you say things and the words have hatred in them, an energy of hatred, it's going to have all these effects, right? So it's really a matter of what's going on inside a person who's receiving the words and what's behind the words. Like I was saying this in the other voiceover. And so it's important to understand this, right? Because this is the idea of casting a spell, right? Because you're trying to evoke something from somebody. You're trying to convince them of something. You're trying to sell yourself to them. You're trying to, make whatever was behind your words. There's usually an agenda. You want to be validated. You want to have somebody pat you on the back, agree with you, or tell you how good a person you are. So you tell this story in which you're the hero, right? Or you want people to be disgusted by you, so you tell a story about how bad you are, or you're trolling them, whatever the thing is, right? Like you have an agenda. Words and conversations usually have some sort of an agenda, right? You're selling something to the listener. You're trying to evoke something from the listener, right? This is the idea of casting a spell. Spelling. You spell a word, spelling. And there was this other comment I read where this person was like, blaming me for my daughter's death and there's other things that was said, right? But at the end of the thing, the person said, let me pull the comment up here. I pulled up the wrong one. Your spiritual arrogance is off the charts in this respect. You have very little compassion to yourself and the failed relationship you have with your own child. To me, this is very disheartening, and no spiritual system on earth will help you see how you neglect her spirit even after she's dead. It's sad, man. I don't vibe with your constant bitching either. It's the revelations of justice in the whole that I tune in for. Your personal opinions and how you throw everyone under the bus is not heartful and compassionate. You fail to live with what you claim to preach. I know you can't see it. Most narcissistic personalities can't. You're lucky to still be here. So that's a weird thing to say. But I want to get into these last things the person said. You fail to live and claim what you preach. I know you can't see it. Most narcissistic personality types can't. But then the person says this. It's the revelations of injustice in the whole that I tune in for. So the whole thing was unsolicited. Like I say, I don't want this kind of thing. Who wants this kind of thing? I mean, nobody wants this thing. And I tell you that I don't want it, right? Over and over again, I tell you I don't have a complaint department. If you want to leave, leave, but don't tell me why you want to leave. Don't tell me what a piece of shit I am. Because what you complain about, someone else will say, I love that stuff. And so, who should I care about? The person who loves the stuff that I'm doing. The channel isn't for you. The channel's for me and for the people who benefit from it, right? Like whoever benefits from this, if you get something from it, great. And you're not going to get everything from it. You're not going to love every part of it. Everything that I cover isn't necessary for each person. Like there's things that you're into, things you like to hear, things, I'm listening to videos and interviews and things. And sometimes a person has things that interest me. And then times they're talking about things they know nothing about that I know more about. And I'm like, I don't need to listen to this, right? Like it's just, if a person's got something wrong that I know more about, then it's a waste of my time, right? But if there's things that they know about that I don't know about, and I'm learning something, it's something different. And so, it's not all for, not everything's going to be for every person. Some people like the humor, some people like this. And so, I might say something hurts your feelings and you get triggered or whatever, and then you want to leave a comment like this, and you dishonestly do it because you're not going to say, what was behind the pain, the anger, the hatred you have for me, or whatever it is, right? The negative feeling you have for me. And nobody wants to hear something like this. Nobody asked for these kind of comments. Nobody said, some people might, but, the majority of people, it's understood. You don't walk up to them and tell them what a piece of shit they are, right? Like if somebody's serving you popcorn at a movie theater and you go ahead and critique the guy's life and start talking about his dead daughter and how it's his fault and, his whole life is a joke and a lie, Like, who would do that? Like, your person that is checking out your groceries or somebody else, whatever it might be. In any kind of job, you don't walk up and just, give a critique of the person, anonymously. The anonymous aspect of this is not some sort of a confrontation, and nobody wants to hear this. This is 100% about your narcissism that you would leave this comment, right? And within the narcissism of the whole comment, there's this very narcissistic line. And I'm saying this because the person's accusing me of being narcissistic. And I'm not saying I don't have narcissism in me. We all do. But it's all these people that can accuse somebody else of narcissism whilst exhibiting it. And the person says, I don't vibe with your constant bitching either. It's the revelations of injustice in the whole I tune in for. Who gives a shit why you tune in? I mean, I'm not asking for you why you guys tune in, especially after a comment like this. These people who think the channel's just for them. And I should get rid of all the things that they don't like, and I should just do the things that they like. That I should just do revelations of injustice in the whole. This is my revelations on injustice is what I should focus on, and not all the other things that bother this person, because the world fucking revolves around them. And it doesn't. This is my channel, and I, follow a path here. And some of it is based in service to God and letting information flow through me. Some of it's, keeping the channel going and keeping it interesting and doing these things. But whatever it is, either like it or you don't, and you're welcome to leave. I'm not pandering to anybody. I'm not asking you for feedback. And so when you say something like this, and then you say, I know you can't see it, most narcissistic personalities types can't. When this person has just said something extraordinarily narcissistic, saying, this is the way I tune in for, this is why I watch your show, like the world revolves around them. And every time I read this type of comment, and there's lots of them, I don't read the majority of them, there's always hidden information in the comments, right? The person's saying that I'm narcissistic and I will never be able to understand it because of my narcissism. But they just said something extraordinarily narcissistic and didn't catch it. Like, the whole comment is narcissistic. So the very few times I have to confront my children, I mean, it's not the few times, when they're going in a direction where I have to intervene and say something. And from my years of experience, I know that they're going to get upset and it's going to hurt their feelings and whatever. But I have to explain it. It's like an intervention. Like you're doing an intervention to somebody, right? And if your goal is to get the person to change, it's highly unlikely it's going to succeed. But if you're doing it correctly, in a therapeutic way or whatever it is, like in a feeling and caring way, you can't let your anger towards them, because they've hurt you in some way, right? If you're confronting somebody about them being a piece of shit, they've hurt you in some way. And so, as a child and as a parent relationship, there's some level, as you get older, it disappears, where they're aware of your ability to read them and tell them what they need to do or not do, these kind of things, right? And so there might be some, pathway there for them knowing that you're concerned and love them, right? If you've established that as your relationship. But if you just go in bitching about the person, what a piece of shit they are, their defenses are going to come up. It's not going to be effective. Like on a subconscious level, maybe. Sometimes it's your duty to say something to people, and sometimes you just have to say it for your own. You have to stand up for yourself or whatever. You have to verbalize things. Like it's one of the reasons I occasionally cover these comments, because so much negativity builds up. But it's also, I'm not doing it for the commenter. The commenter is completely oblivious, right? But I would like to do my part to extinguish this behavior where people go on the internet anonymously and tell somebody else that they're a piece of shit for whatever reason. Because if you feel hatred or anger towards a person, it's really towards yourself. When I cover things and I get emotional about them, which is almost never, it used to be more when I started doing these videos, but I cover things, oftentimes I don't feel anything about them. And, I might say harsh things because I see flaws in people or, whatever it is. But like I don't feel something about it. If I feel something about it, then I'm like, well, why do I feel something about it, right? If I feel hatred, I don't blame it on somebody else. I'm like, why is there hatred in my system? Why is there anger in my system? Which is the great thing about the Sabotage system, because it helps you remove these things. You throw it out of your system, and there's the cleaning process. But when you feel anger, you feel hatred, you feel fear, you feel these things, you got to wonder where it comes from. Why is this? What's going on inside of me, not what's wrong with the other people. I mean, the world's full of lying, deceiving pieces of shit. And so if you feel anger or hatred towards every lying, sack of shit out there, you wouldn't be able to live your life. If you get angry about all these things, then you shouldn't watch it, right? You just, don't tune into it. Like, I wouldn't do this stuff if I felt angry and hateful towards every piece of shit I cover, right? These are horrible people who are lost people going the wrong direction. And what they do is detestable. And, of course, you're going to have emotional reaction to it. I mean, if you really think about it, tune to it. It's, at the very least, you'll feel depressed that this is the way people are, right? But telling people this, telling them they're a piece of shit, doesn't work. Like, it's only you venting. So all these comments are about you venting something that's inside of you that you're projecting on somebody else who has similar qualities, right? If you see some narcissism in somebody and you're mad about it and you want to tell them, or you want to tell the world or whatever, well, it's because you have that same thing in you, right? I realized this years and years ago when I went to this liberal undergraduate school where we had to do some sort of a project. And the first core class, this is where I got my bachelor's degree in human services. And, some of it was Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States, which is not really a truther book, but a way it is. And it's a good idea, where it's written from the perspective of the victims and not the victors. And a lot of it is the documentation of Columbus's own diaries, Columbus's attitude towards these people. He landed in the Bahamas, and there's these Indians called the Arawaks, something like that. And they no longer exist, because Columbus basically killed them all. There was 250,000 of them, and they were wiped out of these islands. Columbus and his men were getting carried around by these people. They conquered them. They colonized these people. They turned them into slaves, and they had some gold, and they thought they had more of it, and so they were like cutting off people's hands if they didn't find gold and bring it to them, right? But the place where they landed didn't have a lot of gold. It was just these islands that had minimal amounts of it, and the people had found what they could. They didn't have, mining techniques. They were fairly primitive. But Columbus's whole, it was brutal what they did to these people, and Columbus was a real piece of shit, and he's celebrated as a hero. And so, I did this thing, a Columbus Awareness Project was part of, you had to do a community service project. And the idea was that if people knew the truth about Columbus, they wouldn't want to have a holiday, right? The Columbus would be a holiday. And back then I thought such things, right? But now I know different, that it doesn't matter. In fact, some people who were there reading the same stuff and who disliked Columbus said they didn't want to give up a day off, so they didn't really want to support what we were doing, right? And at some point I got really angry and frustrated with the whole thing. The people who were doing the project with me and all these things. And I realized, at some point I had some of the same qualities as Columbus. Like, I had some of the same, force in my personality and, whatever it is, like the myopic, narcissistic view of whatever was going on, right? In terms of, like, the frustration I was having with people not, bowing to my, whatever, my opinions and things like this. And I said, well, that's kind of like what Columbus was like. And like a few months later, I found Sabotage, which is about changing yourself. Like, you don't change the world, you don't change other people, you change yourself. And that has been very clear to me from that point on, and I'm constantly reminded of it. And that's why I don't get into it. I'm not trying to change other people. I'm not trying to, do any of these things, because you can't do it. It's just frustrating. As a counselor, as a preceptor, as a, somebody who does a parent, I mean, any number of things that I've done in my life since then, it's just been reminding me over and over again, you can't change people. You can, act as an example. You can be an inspiration to people. When people are desperate, when they really want to change, you can help them then. You can facilitate some of the change then. Only when they themselves have reached the conclusion that they want to change, right? So all this stuff of telling people they're a piece of shit and arguing, it's people dumping their inner their inner shit on other people. That's why when I cover these comments, I always point that out, because you got to understand there's no reason to take these things personally, because if it wasn't you, it'd be somebody else, right? Like whatever they're trying to dump on you, they're dumping on somebody else. The energy's there. You just let it pass through you, or pass by you. You just don't pick up the rope, right? Someone wants to have a tug of war with you. You don't pick up the rope, right? You might point it out to other people. Look at what this person's piece of shit this person is. If you need to say something, you can tell someone else. But getting into some kind of conflict, these people want a relationship with you. That's the thing. They're reaching out and they want to have a negative relationship. It's the, darkness reaching out to the darkness, right? It's the darkness within the person reaching out to the darkness in somebody else so they can have this combative relationship, and each person in complete denial of their own, stuff that they're projecting on the other person. And so this is why I say words don't matter, because they're all, words are, they have an effect. The words have an effect, but it's really the intentions of the person saying the words, and the condition and the inner beliefs of the person receiving them. Whatever how a person has in their view of themselves, right? If a person thinks they're great and you tell them they're not great, then they're going to react because it goes against their belief about themselves. If a person thinks they're a piece of shit and you tell them they're just a disgusting piece of shit, and then they're going to, that's going to cement that belief, and it's going to cause a reaction in that direction, right? And so, most of the things that are said are just useless things. They have no real, merit. They're not making the world a better place. Sometimes you're just communicating information. Like that's where words are helpful. When you're communicating something that's of value to the group, like a bee communicating where the pollen is, these things are going to be helpful to other people, knowledge that you have to pass on to other people. Or if you say something that really, brightens somebody's day. You say, not giving false praise, but you see something in somebody that they don't see themselves. The whole world's telling them they're a piece of shit. And all of us who are truthers, we're always being told by everything in the mainstream media and everyone else we're wrong and we suck. Like that's what, we all have that to some degree. Like everybody hears that on a daily basis. People are trying to take you down, and then somebody says something nice. You point out something that a person does, doesn't breed narcissism in the person. It helps them, motivate them and feel like they're making the world a better place, right? At the end of the day, that's what you're supposed to do. All of us are supposed to make the world a better place. And so when we're doing whatever we're doing, we should consider, how is this making the world a better place? Like for these comment, when I cover a comment, the way that I would justify it making the world a better place is that it helps other people see through these bullshit comments that people leave on the internet and realize if their feelings get hurt, that it isn't about them. If somebody says something mean to them, or somebody says something abhorrent, or somebody does something abhorrent like Donald Trump, it has nothing to do with any of us. There's no reason for us to feel like shit, because of somebody else's venting and, trying to sling poison, that's like a venomous creature that's trying to inject you with their venom. And so you just don't let it happen. You have some will force. You don't attend to it. You don't attune to it, because it's never about you. It's never really personal, right? Because how could it be? Especially when people have never met you, don't know you, and they're just going off of some minimal information, right? And they, launch into this over-the-top reaction, right? Like, where is it coming from? Like, it can't be just because of their limited knowledge of you. We see flaws in people all the time. And most of the time, or for most people, they don't really bother you. As a whole, it's depressing. When you see that humanity's suffering, and we see incompetence, you see, whatever you see in people, the dark side of people, the negativity in people. And so, you just see people like in Walmart or anywhere on TV and the news and this and that, lying and how fake everything is, all of it, the deception. On a whole, it's depression. But in terms of it angering you or being like something that really irritates you, especially if you don't have to see it, you just turn the channel. If you find that you're getting upset, then watch something else or go do something else, right? Like, why do you want somebody else's suckiness to make you feel bad? Which is something every truther should contemplate. Like, before you leave a comment, you should say, why do I feel the way I feel? And what is the reason for me leaving this comment? Like, be honest. Like, if you're going to leave a comment like this person's, and there's so many of them, if the person asks themselves, why am I leaving this comment? Because it's framed like they're trying to help me and that I'm going to change because of it. And no, I mean, it's helped me in the sense I've been able to talk about it now in 2 videos, right? This kind of comment. But it's not helpful. Like, the comment isn't helpful. I mean, the most it could get is make me feel bad about myself or angry at the person. It's going to generate a negative response in me. If you come in and you start off by using my daughter's suicide as a way to tell me I'm a piece of shit, like, what do you think that would do to a person to hear that? Like, if you're if you're justifying your position and your argument that I'm a piece of shit because of my failed relationship with my daughter and my family and things like this, like, then you're not doing it for me. You just want me to feel bad, right? Like, you want me to feel bad. You want to show how great you are and how shitty I am, right? Look at how great I am and how shitty the other person is kind of comments. There's so many of them. I barely receive them anymore. And I know there's so many of them because you see them on the internet if you read any of the comment sections. And, if the people thought about, well, what's going on with me? But they're not introspective. People don't look at themselves and wonder why they feel the way they feel and why they're doing the things that they're doing. I mean, that's one of the lacks of human beings. They never think about, maybe this says something about me. Maybe what I'm saying about this other person is what I really feel about myself. Like, people just don't do that. And that's, part of the failure of humanity. There's no, why am I doing this? So I might be right. Like, let's say the person was right about me. They're not, they don't get anything right in the comment. But they could find actual things that are legitimate character flaws and issues, because I have them. And let's say they were 100% right and they nailed the things that I do, or, things that I'm aware of. So it's not going to be hurtful to me because I'm like, yeah, that's true, right? I'm not saying that that's not true. But, why are you saying it? What's your motivation for saying these words to somebody? What's the energy behind it? What's the intention? And it's obviously not something good, that's going to have a positive effect. And so you wouldn't say it, right? You wouldn't put it out there. So when Trump lies to us all, and he says these things about Israel, and there's implications for the Palestinian people and the people in the Gaza Strip, and the whole relationship with Israel and the Israeli lobby, and the Israeli army, and the Israeli intention to annex Palestine and take over their lands. And Trump buys into that, after he said all these things to all of us about what kind of person he was. You've been deceived, right? He's been lying to you and manipulating you, whether you bought into it or not. And you're going to feel a certain type of way about it, right? This is the one I'm talking about, all these things. Because how could you not? Of course you're going to feel that way, because you should, right? Like, you've been, these people are lying to you, and if you bought into it, you voted for them, you gave them money, these things. And so, there's reactions that people have to what you're doing out in the world. Like, if it's a negative thing, you're making the world a worse place. You're not making America great again. You're making the world a worse place again, because you're using deception to manipulate people. Trump is a master at this, figuring out what people want to hear and tell them that. But there's, at some point, the truth's going to come out that he's using that. He's using you. He's manipulating you, right? Which we all see. Anyways, this has gone on fairly long. I got to move on to the other stuff here. But this is what I kind of was talking about, that words don't matter. The words matter, but it's the stuff that's behind them, the energy, the intention, and all of it. Like, there's a whole, words are the words themselves. Like, if somebody says, I love you, and the energy of love is there, then they're far more substantial than if you just say it, in an unfeeling way, right? If you really feel it, it's just so much more when you can feel the energy, right? When the love is expressing, so the feeling that's there, a deep feeling, and, it helps the other person feel that love, right? And so, I love you is, the words are great, but the love has to be there. Anyways, let's get into the other stuff here. Okay, so I went for a walk, and I had something I want to add to this. It's kind of important. And so there is like a conversion filter that people have for their own bullshit, right? Their own manipulative bullshit. So let's say you have a job or somebody has a job and they are looking forward to getting a promotion, and then some younger, better, smarter, more enthusiastic candidate gets hired, and the person would be a better at you than the job, better than the person at the job, right? And so instead of being honest about this and accepting that they don't deserve the job or whatever, or saying to their boss, this person's obviously better than me, so you should hire, you should promote them instead of me. They start undermining the new person's reputation, saying deceptive things, purposely manipulating the situation, right? And so there's a fundamental dishonesty there. The honest response would be to face the truth about yourself and that that somebody's better than you, right? Or whatever it is, and accept that you're fate. But people don't do that. So there's the truth that hits the person. They see somebody and they're jealous of that person. They feel, inferior or whatever. They have these reactions. And there's no honesty in terms of what they're going to verbalize about their feelings. And they then realize how it's going to affect them. And they're not going to get a promotion or something. And so they work to sabotage that person, right? So they create this plan and this manipulation. And, whatever they're doing is to undermine that person. Whatever their words are, whatever their actions are, whatever they can do to undermine that person. But the person being undermined, why do they deserve that? Like, they've done nothing wrong, at least in this situation. But if you understand that everything that's happening in your life is coming as part of your soul's plan, and you look at it as coming from God, and then you look at whatever the situation is with, like, this is supposed to happen. I'm not a victim here. This isn't some, bad thing that's befallen me. There's a reason for it. Everything, all these negative things that happen, whether people say something mean to you in person in your life or do bad things to you or say something to you on the internet, you can look at it like, one, that this is, well, let's say another example. Let's say somebody's really wants to, they're like hating themselves. Sometimes you see somebody just trying to pick a fight and they're drunk and they want to get their ass kicked. Like something's happened to them. Maybe, the girlfriend broke up with them, some guy or whatever. Something's happened to them, and they're filled with rage and self-disgust, and they want to hurt themselves in some way, and so they go and they just provoke somebody to beat the shit out of them, right? And they say whatever they got to do, and they act in whatever the way they have to act to have that reaction. But if you're on the other end of that, you could end up in prison, right? You could kill a guy, whatever. You could just go to prison for assault. Or any number of things can happen, right? You could get hurt in the fight, or it's just, it has nothing. If it has nothing to do with you, why would you react in such a way? If that person wants to get their ass kicked, it doesn't mean that you're the person that needs to do the ass kicking, right? Like, you have to think about what's going on with your life. But if you have anger and violence inside of you, and you deep down just want to beat the shit out of somebody, and you're at some level you're just looking for an excuse, then you'll act, right? And you can, claim to be a victim and you're provoked. But, if there's other people who walked away. Like, there's other people like, I don't want any part of this, right? This is only has to do with the one person. Not everybody in there is going to kick the guy's ass, right? Everyone in there is going to pick up the rope or take the bait, right? Another example is there's that movie with Demi Moore and Woody Harrelson and Robert Redford. I didn't watch the movie when it came out. It's called Indecent Proposal. And I've tried to watch it, and it's just so bad. Like, the movie's, the acting and the writing, like, I can't get through more than like 5 minutes of it. But the premise of the movie is that Robert Redford's willing to pay Woody Harrelson and his wife, Demi Moore, $1 million if he gets to have sex with Demi Moore. And I think if eventually they do it, and of course I think it ends up destroying their marriage. Like, I don't know what happens at the end of it. It's kind of a silly movie. But, the character, Demi Moore character, is attracted to Robert Redford in some way. Like, the $1 million is the excuse she has to cheat on her husband. And the $1 million, maybe Woody Harrelson, like, has some desire to be cucked, right? Whatever it is, right? Like, the $1 million is just the excuse you use for doing something you really wanted to do without admitting you want to do it, right? Oh, I just did it for the money. Yeah, but really, like, you cut your pecker off for $1 million, like, I mean, It doesn't. $1 billion doesn't buy everything, right? Like all the money in the world wouldn't buy some things. Like what if they offered you all the money, or just a trillion? I mean, just an obscene amount of money, $1 billion or whatever. There's some things you would do for it, but most of the things you wouldn't, right? There's some things that you wouldn't do for it, right? So it isn't the money's a barometer. It isn't like you would do anything for the money. So it has to be something that at least will consider doing, right? Something that you would do would just you have a price. There's a price to which you'll prostitute yourself, right? And so deep down you want to do that thing, or the proposal wouldn't come to you, right? This thing wouldn't happen for you as an option if you didn't really want to do it, if it wasn't something you would consider in life, just in general. So this is what I'm talking about here. Like you can go through your life, reading the ingredients, which we have to do because everyone's lying, and you have to figure out people's motivation and what's really going inside them, and then you almost have to figure out what's happened to them in their lives or their past lives to make them the way they are, right? And so it's an extensive, exhausting procedure. I mean, the better thing to do is just have a sense that everything's coming to you for whatever reason you're experiencing it, and it has nothing to do with the person. No matter how much hostility they verbalize to you, no matter what's going on with them, it's nothing to do with you other than the fact that it's happening to you. And that's what you have to figure out. Like, why is this in my life? Like, why am I having this interaction, right? This is, why is this thing, why is this part of my experience? And then once you figure that out, the other stuff becomes irrelevant. Like in terms of being a spiritual person, you're figuring out what inside of you is generating the things that are coming to you. The people that are coming into your life and the situations coming into your life. If you remove something inside of you, those situations disappear. If something's cleaned out, it no longer exists. If there's something, there's nothing on the inside attaching you to something on the outside, then it ceased to exist in your existence. You no longer, once the attachment's broken, once the bond is broken between you and another person or you and a situation, once it's cleaned off, once you've done what you have to do, the situation disappears. And so in that way, these things where people are so upset about the words people say, and then worse, the actions and the other things, you got to understand why this is part of your life. God, why am I experiencing this? And if you ask honestly, the answer will come, and then you can do whatever you need to do to remove that within yourself. That's why the hallmarks of the Sabotage teaching and the idea of samskaras. Anyway, let's move on to the other stuff here. Okay. So I want to start with this. One of my viewers left a comment. I had no idea. I've been calling this girl the fake Christian Barbie. Is that what, fake Christian Barbie? And it's a tough job. Like I said, I give them a little bit of a pass because they are part of their job description is lying and being deceptive. But she has kind of already crossed the line in numerous ways, putting her own personal spin on things, using shame, calling it evil for people wanting the Palestinian people to be able to stay in their homeland. I mean, just shit like that, right? And she's going full Trump. And then one of my viewers said that her husband is 32 years older than she is. She's 28, so he's 60. I think she's 28. And so, a couple of things here. It says here, who is Nicholas Riccio, husband of Trump's press secretary Caroline Levitt? The property developer is 32 years older than his Gen Z wife. They married last summer and now share a son. And so, here's the thing. She said this guy's the man of her dreams. I married the man of my dreams is what she said. How is this guy the man of anybody's dreams, right? Especially a 28-year-old girl who has, I'm sure, plenty of prospects, right? So this guy's rich. He's a real self-developer. But I'm sure there's other rich guys that, you could say it was about money. But it must be about something else because she is somebody who's, semi-famous. I don't know how she became press secretary, but she is successful in her own right. And she is good at doing the press secretary job. Like, it's a shitty job, and she's a liar, and she has to lie. But she's good at it. She's already good at it. She's adept for a young girl to be able to do this job. And maybe she's only 25. I don't know. We'll see. But how is this guy the man of her dreams, right? You know, let's say he's the nicest guy in the world, the best, just a peach of a human being. He looks like a thug and a gangster, but maybe beyond his appearance. But you know he's a little bit of a piece of shit because he's a real estate developer and he's dating 20-year-old girls, right? If he was that great a guy, he would have a wife already. I mean, if he was some sort of, he's got money, he's successful, and he's probably been married numerous times. So if he was that great a guy, then if he was the greatest guy in the world, some woman would have snatched him up years ago, and he would stay married to his wife and be loyal to her because, all of those things. I'll go search in a moment, see how many marriages he has. So, but if you look at this guy, he doesn't look like anybody's man of the dreams. He got this little monkey here, the little tuxedo. And so, it says some more things. She's 27 years old. So she was 26 when she met him. He's 59. And, I'm 60. And so a 60-year-old man, and I'm sure I'm younger just in terms of my genetics than this guy. Like everyone in my family, my parents both lived into their 90s. 3 of the 4 grandparents lived into their 90s. I had a grandmother who lived till she was 100. And everyone in my family ages at a slower rate than other people, right? And so, but, I'm still, even if I was 10 years younger, I'd still be 50. People age differently. That's what I'm saying. And if you're an old guy like this, you wouldn't be anybody's dream guy. You shouldn't be, unless it's somebody your age, right? Unless it's somebody who's, in your, but not some 7-year-old girl. And so, there's things I want to say about this in a voiceover. But she, again, she's had a successful career enough so that she can marry a 60-year-old real estate developer in 2023 and promptly had a child. I'm sure if his money had nothing to do with it. Well, like I said, there's, she would be able to get money elsewhere, right? Like there's the weird picture here. But it's just, you're setting yourself up for a disaster because in 10 years he'll be 70. And, 70 is 70. And, his sex drive is probably already diminished. He's probably having to take, I don't know what her level of, everyone has their level of, how much they need intimacy and physical contact. But, I can't imagine at my age, and I'm sure I'm younger and better shape than this guy, raising a toddler. Think about how, when you're, if those of you have been parents, how hard it is to have a toddler, right? A toddler is, here's her, this is them together here, some pictures of them here. And they want to show you her Instagram. But when you have a toddler, you need to be a young person. And when you have multiple kids, you must probably want more than one kid. I'm sure they can hire nannies and things. There's money there. The other thing is, here's her Instagram. Caroline Levitt, it's a check mark. She, this seems to be her dream guy. Because there's pictures of her baby. And there's virtually no pictures of her and her husband. There's another one of her and Trump. There's her doing the press secretary thing. There's her and her Tulsi Gabbard and these other women. She's relatively short compared. Look at fucking Laura Trump. She's a freaking giant. Tulsi Gabbard. These are these famous, women, the Trump women. There's the devil with, she's there with the devil there and some other people. There's the devil. And so she has lots of pictures of Trump. I think these are her brothers or something. When your childhood best friend marries your brother's childhood best friend, it makes an unforgettable weekend. Again, I don't think there's any pictures of her and her husband here. Like these things, right? So there's her and again with Trump. Trump is, put on some serious weight there. And so, there they are together, there, and there. And that's it. Like, again, just how is that your dream guy? So there's like something wrong with her. Whatever caused this marriage, this Trump again. Mostly her pictures are her and Trump. There's her with her husband again. And so there's more pictures of her and Trump, and mostly just her. than her and her husband, right? Like this is, if it's the man of your dreams, you think there would be more expression of that stuff than, these kind of, a lot of pictures where she's, you know, modeling or whatever it is. I mean, a younger person, there they are giving the thumbs up. So I looked at a number of articles. She has a Wikipedia page, but he doesn't. He doesn't have any social media. Like he's not an Instagram or any of these things. She said he's an introvert, which why in the world would you marry somebody in this position if you're an introvert? I mean, there's going to be scrutiny. And as the hatred for Trump intensifies, so will the hatred for his press secretary. She's his mouthpiece. And the liberal media and all these people will go after this guy and all of it, right? And so they'll look into it. But there's no information about the guy. It's all information that has to do with her. It says how many kids they have, and it says one, but it doesn't mention that he might have been married previously, any of these things. Like, that would be public information, and the news media isn't choosing to look into it. Like, the guy doesn't have anything other than he's a millionaire real estate developer. That's all there is about him, right? But she has her own Wikipedia, and she's, famous. She grew up in New Hampshire, and press secretary. Personal life, she married Nicholas Rico, a real estate developer with 32 years her senior. This is pretty much all they say about. Gave birth to a son, and but changed her mind. She planned to go on maternity leave, but changed her mind after seeing July 13th, 2024 attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, and resumed her professional duties. She credits her Catholic schooling for instilling pro-life values, discipline, and importance of public service. Well, that's not great. But she was going to take maternity leave, but she didn't. She was working for Trump because of the bogus assassination attempt. An unreal, like some bogus thing that Trump was faking. She chose that Trump over her own kid, and the mother-child bonding that you would normally get, right? It's not a good job for somebody who just became a mom. And so the whole thing is weird. Like the fact that this guy there's nothing about him, right? As far as I can tell, there's nothing there about the guy. Let me ask the AI bot. So it says, was Nicholas Riccio previously married? And if so, have children with those women? Based on the provided information, Nicholas Riccio is currently married to Caroline Levitt. Again, if he is her dream girl, why didn't she take his last name? They were married in 2024. They have one child together, a son named Nico. There is no information available in the provided context regarding Nicholas Riccio's previous marriages or any children from potential prior relationships. The guy's 60 years old. You mean this is his first marriage? Or is there just, everything's been scrubbed? Is this guy even alive? Is it just like, is she just a single mom, right? Like, it's just, the whole thing is fucking weird. Okay, so a few things about this. I've talked about some scars. Like, people have relationships. There's only a certain number of people that you have enough of a connection with that you could actually have a successful marriage. There's plenty of people you could be acquaintances with or friends with or, have some sort of work relationship. But there's probably, only a few people, their souls. There's a connection there. You feel people with past life connections. You feel people like you just know them. You're very comfortable around them. There's people that are significant in your life. And your kids and the people, that are in your family, usually there's some sort of connection there. Sometimes it's more substantial than other times. Sometimes some of the people in your family, your siblings, you have a real deep connection. Sometimes there's a connection, but not a really deep one. The people that stand out in your life, there's really a deep connection. There is, that. This might be one of those people for her. Let's say this guy, this creepy thug-looking MNFer is one of those people, right? And she's, kind of weird. She's a Trumper and, all the things. She buys into this stuff, kind of doe-eyed, I mean, she's smart enough to do the job, but she's bought into this bullshit with Trump for whatever reason. Like I said, if money was a factor, she could have probably found a rich guy who was in his 40s, right? Like, she could have married some guy in her 40s. He'd still be 13 years older than him, right? Or older than her. So, if he was 40 and even in his mid 40s. So some guy in his 60s, I mean, he's more than twice her age. There's a 32-year age gap, and she's 27. And so her parents are probably younger than this guy. We saw this with Kamala Harris, right? So Kamala Harris's mom was younger than that guy. I think his name was Brown. That she, what I call Kamala Knee Parrot Harris. So there's lots of people who were Trump supporters and people in the truth community, and we all made fun of Kamala Harris for banging a guy twice her age. She was 29, he was 61, similar age gap. And because of that relationship, she was able to advance her political career. Like, he was a kingmaker. He was like the most influential person in California politics, and he, made her career. This is a well-known, whatever, right? We all know about this. So if you're going to judge Kamala Harris, this is what I've talked about over and over again, for in a relationship that's just completely fucked up, then you would have to say it's the same thing with this woman. Like, just because she believes what you believe or she's a Trumper doesn't exclude her from the same kind of criticism of this relationship. And like I said, let's say there's a past life connection between these two. There's something there. It's still completely fucked, right? Because marriage is really difficult, and given the circumstances of her job, a high pressure job. I mean, I don't know where this guy, he lives in D.C. with her. I don't know what they're thinking. But they're raising a kid. She has a very stressful, high pressure job. Very busy, probably working 60, 80 hours a week. And there's this massive age gap, right? And, like I said, when you get older, you can't do the things you do when you're younger. And as a 40-year-old, you don't want to have a toddler. As a 50-year-old, you certainly don't. And a 60-year-old, it's impossible. He's going to be 80 by the time these kids are 20. His son is 20. And so that's, he's going to be, 70 in whatever amount of years, 10 years. She's going to be in her 30s. She's still going to be maybe at the height of her, I think, of women in terms of their, their sexual prime or something, supposed to be in their mid-30s or something. And this guy's, he won't be able to function. Like all these women or men who date really young women, there's something wrong, right? There's, you can't relate to people in a different generation. I dated a girl who was 10 years younger than me when I was in my 30s, and it was a nightmare. I was like, this is the worst thing ever. I was talking to this guy who was a waiter. I was waiting tables. And I said, Jesus, this is like horrible. Like, I was just like, everything sucks about it. And he goes, yeah, I dated a girl 10 years younger than me once. And I was like, she would laugh at something and I'd be like, yeah, that was funny 10 years ago. And that just sort of summed up the relationship. There's things, phases of your life that you go through, and you really can't relate. Someone can't relate to something, they can't relate to your, any of your childhood. I mean, when you were growing up, they weren't even born. They didn't experience the things you did. My wife and I, there's like a two-year age gap. She's 2 years younger than me. In my previous marriage, I was 5.5 years younger than my wife, and she was a total boomer, and I was a Generation Xer, and there were some differences, right? Like there was just some differences with a 6-year age gap, and she was the oldest in her family. I was the youngest. There's just different things like that, right? And so those things play a part in all this, cultural things. I've seen, intercultural marriages in the Sabotage system, and these things tax you because you just don't understand other people's customs. They have a totally different understanding of what relationships are. It's just like, I've said this before. In the Indian culture, if you point your bottom of your feet at somebody, it's considered a grave insult. You're saying like you're less than dirt, like I should walk on you. And a lot of people in the, India, but Middle Eastern area, this is part of their thing. You're not supposed to point your feet. There's all kinds of things with your feet. Calling somebody dirt is a bad, there's a whole thing with that, right? But over the years, I noticed there are a lot of Indian people that would point with their middle finger, right? And when I was in India, there was some guy, he just came up and held my hand and led me across the street. One of the practitioners of the system, which, was kind of weird for me. Weird things. You see these guys holding hands, they're straight men holding hands, friends, like, as like adults or teenagers and things. And so they can't show their ankles, there's the whole thing. So men have to wear like long pants and the women wear these It's incredibly hot there. I mean, there's all these customs. And in the culture itself, there's all these customs. And they don't understand how you could do something that goes against their custom, like if you marry somebody. And so there has to be this huge communication, even in India, where people marry between castes, or they marry out of their state. If you marry somebody, if you're someone from New York and you marry someone from Alabama, the cultural differences, the different races, the racial differences, all these things play a part. And they tax the effectiveness or the success rate of marriages. Age is one of the bigger things, right? So this guy probably has maybe even daughters or kids older than this girl or the same age, right? Like if he had kids when he was in his 30s, they would be, her age or older. Like if he got married before, and so it's just something weird about it. It's weird for you as an older person to be attracted to younger people. There's almost like a pedo thing, even though it's not illegal. The thing with Woody Allen said that, his wife, who was his wife's was his his other wife, his ex-wife's adoptive daughter, and he was her father figure, and he raised her when she was like 10, 11 years old. He came into, Mia Farrow had adopted this girl from Korea, and he married her when she turned 18. So there must have been things going on before that. He had dated a high school girl, and in his movie Manhattan, he dated a high school girl, and that was based on his real life. The woman came forward and said she was a high school girl when Woody Allen dated her when he was 40, and the guy's always looked like he's 80. I mean, he's always looked old. And so he says that the relationship is very paternal between him and his wife, and that's just weird. Like, there's something weird about it. And like you're saying, this is the man of her dreams. I mean, just like there's something off about her, right? There's something off about all these people. There's just weirdness in whatever they're doing. Bill Belichick's dating some girl. He's in his 70s, and she's just graduated high school. She's like 23. And he got ridiculed at the, some sort of, SB sports thing. Snoop Dogg was making fun of him. The New York Post is covering this. There's just something, off about it, right? It's just not right. Most marriages are within, 3 to 5, whatever, 0 to 5. People are marrying someone their age, or maybe a 4 or 5 year age difference. And, marrying people that grew up in similar backgrounds and similar, and just your economic of growing up in a suburb as opposed to a city, as opposed to a farm, growing up in the South or the West as opposed to, an Eastern city. I mean, there's all these factors that are involved. And the more differences you have, the more things that you don't understand about the other person, the harder it is to, have a successful marriage, especially with all the things going against you in our modern day culture. And this is completely fucked. And so, again, just something weird. Like I already thought she was weird and all the things that she was exhibiting. And then there's this, this huge age gap with this, this mafia-looking motherfucker, right? That she says is the man of her dreams. When you get into a marriage, you could be completely in love with some person, but if you do it, the younger you do it, the less chance of success you have. Because people change and evolve, and this is another idea of samskaras. There's samskaras come out. They change their belief systems, and people grow apart. Even if they really love each other, they have less and less in common. I mean, some people just hit it right, and they both are really great, together, and they can't imagine life without each other. They enjoy everything, and they stay in love in these things. But oftentimes it doesn't happen. So the more you have going against you, with just the fact that divorce is so prevalent in our society, and everything is, about hurting the relationship. The marital relationship takes a beating from people's work, from people's friends, from the things you watch, from the bashing of men or the bashing of women, or, all the things, politics, all the things that are out there, that are there that help divide people in a marital situation. And so when you go in with liabilities like a huge age gap, the thing's built for failure. But why would you even want that? Like I said, as a 60-year-old man, I can't even have conversations with people in their 20s. There's so many differences between my upbringing and their upbringing. It's hard to even understand them, especially now with the age of computers and these millennials. You don't even understand them, right? And they look like they're kids. Like when I see someone in their 20s, it seems like they're teenagers. And it's just, there's such a difference in our life experiences and what we, what my life has been over 60 years and what their life has been for these last 20 years. Even 30 and 40-year-olds have significantly different upbringings and different, their mentality and everything's different. Like there's a gap there. There's these generation gaps, and they've never been more prevalent than now. And so again, just a weird thing. Like why would anybody? I mean, both sides. Why would a 60-year-old man marry someone in their 20s? Marry some old guy like that? Just like why would you? I mean, why would that be an option? Why would that even cross your mind? It's icky. Like it's gross. Anyways, let's move on to the next thing here. Okay, so I was eating lunch. I was watching some of the ESPN's pregame show to the Super Bowl. This game isn't going to start for another 5 hours, and I was watching probably about half an hour ago. And they were talking about some of the betting on the Super Bowl. And last year they bet there was $1.25 billion bet on the Super Bowl. And this year it's supposed to be more. It's going to be 1.4. And so that's crazy. Over $1.5 billion just in betting on the Super Bowl. And so somebody left this comment, Paul, I'm disgusted. This is not what America got tricked into voting for. Bring on the apocalypse now. So this is the thing to do. How and why Trump suckered people into America's ultimate downfall. That's my video I just made public. And so, with the thing with Trump is that the American people have zero leverage, only from the standpoint that when the American people, the polls go south on him, and the Republicans start worrying about losing their seats and things like this, and the turn, in the midterms, then, there's some leverage there, whatever voting and the media and all these things. But other than that, Trump is not running for re-election, and whatever he got out of the voters and the Trumpers and Make America Great Again people, and they'll still stick with him. He knows it, no matter what, most of them, a lot of them, that he doesn't need them anymore. And we know what Trump does when you don't have any real leverage. Like Trump, you need to have leverage in your relationship with Trump. But anyways, here's Dick Durbin.
Next,
Block Cash Patel.
to the nominations of individuals to serve on the courts of our land, which are often lifetime appointments. This appointment of the head of the FBI is one of the most serious that the Senate Judiciary Committee should consider.
It's very serious.
We decided 50 years ago to depoliticize the FBI by giving 10-year tenures to those who headed up the FBI to transcend any single administration or any single president. So that's one of the most important things that distinguishes this nomination from others. Secondly, we have an individual in Kash Patel who has published a book which in detail describes his view of politics in America. It is a book that is filled with grievances, filled with conspiracy theories.
So that's why I'm showing you this. It's filled with conspiracy theories.
And filled with information of how he sided with the January 6 rioters against the police.
Insurrectionists, bro. They were insurrectionists. They weren't rioters. They were insurrectionists.
In this very Capitol complex.
They were trying to overthrow the government.
And so when he came to testify before the committee, we had some questions that he was asked and he needed to answer about his conduct. And we went through them, particularly on the element of the J6 choir. I know this sounds like a curious thing to spend any time on.
Yeah, it was silly. The whole thing was silly. And he's silly. And Kash Patel's a piece of shit, just like these guys are. And, it's all a mess. Like, it's amazing America's still, it's functioning, especially now that there's no government. Now that Trump's taking a sledgehammer, maybe it'll function better now that there's no government. We'll see how it happens, right? But, the America, as corrupted as it is, it's a system. It's like a body. You have these organs. And if you start taking organs out of your body compensates, but it's not nearly as good, right? And as corrupt as it is, and as fucked up as these agencies are, and as resource heavy, resource draining as they might be, it's still, they're necessary to the whole. And Trump isn't a thoughtful or reasonable person. Elon Musk is also impulsive, and neither one of them understand the government. I mean, they haven't worked there; they're not career lifers. They're coming from a business perspective, and they also have their hands out in there. They're trying to gut the things like Elon Musk is certainly going to go after the agencies that would go after him. He got propped up. He got billions of dollars from the government for his car company, for electric cars, right? And so he got funded in a way that was, not cool. And he's trying to get rid of some of these other things. But anyways, his book is filled with conspiracy theories. Okay, let's get back to it here.
Now to the growing legal battles over the Trump administration's efforts to reshape the federal government and its workforce. ABC's senior White House correspondent Selena Wang joins us now from Washington with the latest move by a federal judge now. Selena, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Whit. Yeah, a federal judge is now putting the brakes on President Trump and Elon Musk's plan to dismantle USAID. So the White House is trying to slash the size of the federal government, but millions of people around the world rely on this relief agency for desperately needed food and medicine. Overnight, a
Selena Wang.
federal judge blocking the Trump administration's plan to put thousands of workers at USAID on leave and reinstating hundreds who've already been removed.
Okay, so one news person said that he's getting rid of all these agencies that are contributing or are they are helping Americans, right? Americans are depending on all these agencies, and you should not be depending on your government. All these agencies that are there, the social service agencies, because I worked in the field. I worked in treatment centers. I worked in an outpatient clinic that were all paid for. These services were paid for by the government. And most of it's a waste of money. A lot of it's dysfunctional. Taking kids out of homes, even the worst homes, and putting them in worse foster care or treatment centers where the kids are even worse off than their homes. These social workers, many of them good people, who are overwhelmed by their job and just the bureaucracy of it all. The healthcare system, all these things. It's for people to do for neighbors, like people taking care of each other. And so once you depend on the government, then you're like not thinking that you need to help each other out, and everyone has to pay all these taxes, and they think that the money should be going to instead of where they could spend that money to help other people, like, for example, if people were inclined to do so. And our economic system, everything is for selfishness, right? But it certainly isn't our responsibility to help people around the world, other than the fact that we're eating their resources, right? And so a way to not have to help people around the world is not colonize them and take their resources from them. Like, that's how fucked the system is. So, you can't fix that, right? Like this, but they're trying to say all these people are going to starve around the world, and they're doing all these horrible things. They're trying to guilt and shame Musk and Trump, who are immune to such things, right? They're rich, heartless guys, and they don't care about who suffers for whatever they want to do, right? As long as they get their kickbacks. I mean, they're both going to make bank. Elon Musk has already got paid a fortune for his electric car company, and he's got governmental subsidies for so much of what he does, but he doesn't mind depriving other people because they're narcissistic sociopaths, right? So Bill Gates weighed in.
The fight over the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, a program that dispenses billions in foreign aid. On Monday, Elon Musk said President Trump agreed.
Foreign aid, again, we're profiting on the suffering and pain and eating the food and using the resources of various, many countries around the world. And so it's not U.S. aid, right? We're giving back a fraction of what we're taking. Like, if they could grow their own food and the system wasn't rigged against these countries, they would be much better shape, but they're not. And, this is a lot to do with the U.S. policies and the world policies, right?
Agreed with him that it needed to be shut down. Earlier, I spoke with Bill Gates, the Microsoft founder, whose Gates Foundation is one of the largest charitable organizations in the world. We discussed,
yeah, sure it is.
Discussed Elon Musk and the funding fight. The interview is part of a book tour he's doing for a memoir of his early years, Source Code, My
He just looks like he was going to be a really outstanding human being.
Beginnings. Well, let's start with Elon Musk. He's called USAID a criminal organization. He called it evil. He talked about it's a radical left political psyop. To you, what is the importance of USAID and the U.S. giving aid to people in need around the world?
Well, USAID plays a super important role in dispensing our aid budget, which is less than 1% of the government budget. Usually it's pretty obscure, so maybe this is a chance to talk about, okay, is some of that work we'd like to change, but overall, it's work that saves millions of lives.
Millions of lives, because he's about saving millions of lives. That's why he got the Population Award from the United Nations, which gives the award to people who are working to decrease the population, which we saw in his TED Talk, where he said, whatever it said, innovating to zero, reducing the carbon emissions. One of the things you have to reduce is the amount of people, which is a well-known thing. Like, everybody who knows this understands there's going to be a population reduction that is necessary, whether it's done intentionally, whether it's done through, natural causes, whatever, it's a planned thing or whatever it is, it's going to happen. And they've been trying to do it, and it's not successful in a lot of these countries. In China and India, Indira Gandhi and the Prime Minister of China at the time were the first to get the award for United Nations Population Award, which I think they hide now. They used to have a part of their website that talked about it, and now I think they've gotten rid of it, that people started to figure out that they were giving an award to people who reduced the population. And Indira Gandhi and this guy from China, each of them basically killed or reduced the population by 30 million people in India and China. And they both were given this award, whatever it is. It's some money and some whatever, like a trophy or something. And it was through, forced sterilizations, abortions, other things, right? All these things that are just kind of abhorrent. And even when they both reduced the population by 30 million in their countries that were growing to be 1 billion people, it didn't do a dent. Like it wasn't effective. And, you go to these countries and you see that there's so many people living in poverty and there's so little resources. I mean, there's places all over the world like this. And there is a need for these, places to have a reduced population, but, it's not as easy as people think. It is moving now with the whole thing with COVID and whatever happened. It's better than it was. The gap between the amount of people dying and the amount of people being born. And, it's starting to narrow this gap. But this guy got an award for that, but he also talks about wanting to save lives. Why do you want to save lives if you're a person that believes in population control, right? Like, the things don't make sense.
Helps strengthen relationships for the United States.
If it's just moved into the State Department, does that matter?
No, the exact organization can change. It was kept separate, so the idea of helping the poorest, you'd have a real priority for that in mind. And I'm not against some degree of tuning, but having all those people not come into work and characterizing the whole thing in a negative way, I'm a little disappointed in that.
Are you, Bill? Are you disappointed? Are you? If it resulted in millions of people dying, wouldn't you be a little bit more than just being disappointed, right? So this is the kind of shit that's going on here, right? This is what we're dealing with. Bernie J. Sanders.
Senator Sanders joins us now. You talk about an oligarchy running the White House. You have billionaires now currying favor with the new administration, donating to the presidential library, the inauguration, making deals with family members of the Trump family. How far are we from a kleptocracy?
Well, let's start with oligarchy, and I think we are there.
We're there. We all there.
You know, when you see three of the richest people in this country, the three richest, standing behind the president when he gets inaugurated, when you see Elon Musk, who contributed over $200 million, 270, to get Trump elected, and then becomes in many ways the most important appointee of the Trump administration, and when you see since Trump's inauguration,
Okay, Bernie, you're losing us here, bro.
Elon Musk becoming $150 billion richer.
Richer. He's richer.
In 2.5 weeks, $150 billion richer.
Richer. It was a good investment on his part.
You tell me whether or not we are living in an oligarchy. And I think
I say no, Bernie.
the function
Not that I say no, it's just the whole thing just to provoke you.
of government under Trump, under Elon Musk, will not be to serve ordinary people, but to make the very richest people in this country even richer.
No way. That's crazy.
There are probably some people watching who think, oh, Elon Musk, smart guy. He's got these 19, 20-something-year-old tech wizards going into government and looking for waste and abuse. And what's wrong with that? What is wrong with what is going on?
Nothing wrong with looking for waste and the kinds of bureaucracy that exist. I think we can do a whole lot
We can do a whole lot about that kind of shit.
to get rid of the waste, the fraud, the excessive bureaucracy that exists in government, especially, by the way, in the Defense Department.
Defense Department, he means the military-industrial complex.
What is wrong right now is one simple reality. What Musk is doing is illegal and unconstitutional.
So is he going to jail? Or is it going to be stopped? Or are you just going to bitch about it, right? So this is part of what we're seeing all over. I mean, some of the people are even more upset. They're kind of flipping out. And, the videos aren't coming up. Like I could, maybe I'll get to this tomorrow. I'll find more of them. But, they're flipping out. And some of it is, like, legitimate. But it's still funny. And so, you can only ride things out. There's so little can be done to change the course of humanity, the course of America, the course of our fate, right? It's already kind of been written. There's no way we can fix it. I mean, the damage has been done. And so it's just a matter of what is the destruction of America. And we'll see as we move forward. Like, things are going to happen. Everything's happening quickly. And, we haven't reached that threshold where people are really feeling their lifestyle being diminished. Like right now, things are more expensive in the grocery store. People are tightening their belts. They're not buying certain things they used to, food-wise and otherwise. People have less disposable income because of the inflation. And it's bad. It's enough that people are concerned about it, but it isn't riot-worthy. Yeah, you don't see people rioting over it yet, right? You don't see people starving, like a lot of them. There's people who are, maybe going without more than other people, but you don't see the effects. But like when it reaches that level where people are like, oh my God, this is beyond what we can bear. That people don't have electricity for long periods of time, and, they don't have, they can't heat their homes. I mean, basic needs, not having any food or enough food, or, they're starving or whatever. When you get to that level, which is going to happen, it hasn't really happened in America to the extent I'm talking about. And when you have a good portion of the population that are having these issues, and people start rioting, and the civil unrest, then it's something. There's like a stage that we've reached that we haven't seen before, and we'll see what happens then, and what it takes for that to occur, and how much blame is going to go on Trump, whether he's responsible for it or not. He's going to, of course, be somewhat responsible, but this thing is going to happen no matter what. Trump can't fix it and save it and stop it, and he's contributing to it. Okay, so then there's this. Falling Starlink satellites worried scientists. 120 fell from space in January. And so in January 2025, 120 SpaceX Starlink satellites re-entered Earth's atmosphere disintegrating as they burned up. The fuck? As they burned up. Where was I? Increasing frequency of such incidents, raising concerns among scientists and environmentalists about the impact of these satellites on atmospheric pollution. Well, if you can't even do this right, like whatever's going on there. And also there's the electromagnetic web. I mean, we're affected by energies, right? We have energy in our system. We have lots of water. Water is affected by a conduit for these types of things. We know what microwaves do to people, and that's 4G. Microwaves, what they do to, flesh. If you put something in a microwave and, low levels of it still have a negative effect. And 5G is even, all these things, right? And, it's just, it's a bad idea. And Elon Musk is kind of like an evil supervillain. And even though he's popular now because of Trump support. And then there was this. Can you imagine sending thousands of dollars on an astronaut hot air balloon and only to end up of the astronaut nutsack, right? So somebody built this balloon only to end up being as an astronaut's nutsack. So one of my viewers sent me this. Okay, so I just kind of want to end the video here. I have another voiceover just going to put up here in case people are interested. But, so here's the thing. Republicans and Trumpers don't like foreign aid. And, of course, I don't like giving money to Israel. I don't like giving money to Ukraine for these wars. But there are countries that we have hurt or we're exploiting. And the people are suffering because of the system being rigged against them and rigged in our favor. And I know that's the case because of the amount of resources and the lifestyle we have and the lifestyle and the resources these countries have. And, there are deals done. Like Trump is a big guy about how he can negotiate better deals. But Trump has long made a career of bullying people with less resources, whether it's contractors or whoever else, for richer people. He's always bullying he's like the opposite of Robin Hood, stealing from the poor and giving to the rich. And if he'll do it to these people, he'll do it to you. And so that is whatever it is. And that's going to play out whatever way it plays out. But, the whole thing is kind of fucked. So I did a voiceover. One of these guys I call the Dodgy Truther, who's a member of the Sabotage system, Heartfulness, who dislikes Dodgy. He contacts me every once in a while and sends me something that's fucked up going on with Heartfulness. And, I'm doing this voiceover for the 190th edition of the Journey series. I thought I might include it here because I've talked about that recently here as well. And so you can listen to that if you want. Otherwise, if you're a member, it'll be coming around in a little time in terms of the Journey series. But anyways, here's that. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is the 190th edition of the Journey series. So I got some information. When the Basant gathering happened, I didn't have any reason to look at what they were doing over at Heartfulness, right? In the past, Dodgy had said this stuff about canceling Chargie's birthday and Babaji's birthday like a couple Basants ago. And so I've been monitoring the gatherings to see if he would, how he would deal with that situation. Like he said he received a message from Babaji saying that they should combine the two gatherings, the 4 gatherings, into 2. And they were going to celebrate Babaji's and Lalaji's on Lalaji's birthday and Chargie's and Dodgy's on Dodgy's birthday. And which is weird because Chargie's the older, he would be Dodgy's master. If you're going to celebrate Babaji's and Lalaji's together, which was silly because Babaji's 125th anniversary of his death was coming up the next year, and it wasn't going to hold. I knew it wasn't. People showed up for Chargy because there's more Chargy people. Most of the people that are in the mission are Chargy people. Dodgy hasn't brought his own people in because he sucks and the system's watered down. So it was a goofy thing he said, and it was a message he got, and And Babaji had left all these other messages saying how important the day of the gathering, the day of the masters were, how they were important for people to get a boost. There was just no evidence to support anything he was saying. Like, he was just making up that he got a message, which was completely fucked up, right? We had these whispers of the brighter world messages. I might include this in the end of a video, just for other people on my, my regular video. So, the whispers of the brighter world messages. This French woman, who is, she's physically impaired. She had she fell off a horse. She came from money. She fell off a horse when she was a child. She was in her 80s in 2018. So, she would be, probably 90 or something years old now. So, like, she grew up, 90 years ago. So in the 30s or whatever it was. And she fell off a horse. And she said she had a surgeon that she referred to as a butcher. And, I don't know the specifics, but some nerve damage happened, and she was just in physical pain for the rest of her life. You have these nerves in your lower back, the sciatic nerve or whatever it is, these various nerves. People have sciatica, the pain that you have with that. And he messed with one of her nerves, and it was just pain for the rest of her life. And so she couldn't really do anything. She was like a shut-in. And she was a channeler. She had these past lives where she was a medium. And she was contacted by this second master, Babaji, and she had these 20,000 channeled messages, right? And so we'll get back to that in a bit. But, with channeled messages, and I'm going to talk about that later, there's always going to be some level of, it's just like with QAnon. When you have an anonymous source, let's say Q started off as a real person. Well, they could just kill that person, lock that person up, and then continue putting out the messages. So when it's anonymous, you don't know if it's a group of people. If someone claims to have Q-level clearance, you don't know if it's a poser. It's, just the things that are said, anything that's anonymous is questionable, right? And when you're talking about an etheric being, when you're talking about channeling, is all these other issues, right? So there's people who can actually channel disembodied souls. But Babaji, even when he was, a disembodied soul, warned the medium and said, not all these souls are good. And so if you're a medium, you're going to get in contact with negative entities, whatever, things that people would consider demons, lower level souls. And they could say, hey, I'm Babaji. I'm like you don't see the person. And so it's just whatever way that you interpret etheric interaction. You might feel the soul's presence, and you might feel something's off, but it's always going to be, anything that happens in the spiritual world is going to be vague. It's going to be less, substantiated, right? And so you have that. So you have mediums, and the mediums have to be careful in who they're connecting with. Ones who can connect with legitimate souls and things, right? So there's people who have this ability. But then there's people who just make it up. It's their imagination. So it's their inner voice, different parts of their personality. And they're, I'm talking to God. People think they're talking to God, and it's something inside themselves, right? So, they're mentally ill. They have diffuse personalities. And so, but they could be both, right? You could be a medium that sometimes you are connected to other souls, or, you're connecting to God or divinity within you. Even as every one of us who does meditation and is connecting internally, we have to understand what's our soul and what's our ego, because, your ego will, in a sense, disguise itself, and you'll hear, whatever, the ego will have a way of self-talk, which I guess I'm going to cover in the beginning of my video today. People have an internal self-dialogue, right? And where's the voice come from? And, people with multiple personalities and these things. And so there's all that kind of stuff, right? So then there's people who are just flim-flam people, right? People who are, grifters, who pretend that they channel, right? You go to some psychic, and most people who are psychic have had some sort of trauma. Oftentimes it's like a loss of a loved one. and it opens up psychic abilities. The pain of losing a loved one, they want to so desperately connect with the loved one's soul, and they have these abilities, and it opens up the, these abilities. But oftentimes it's like sexual abuse and things that make a person crazy. And so lots of times people who are psychic are also crazy. Any time you're floating between two worlds, this world of the spirit and the material world. Sometimes you don't have the ability to decipher what's true or not, like what's in the real world and what's in the world of the spirit. And so, it's there's almost the people it's a confusion that happens, right? When people are dying, they seem to hallucinate and lose sense of reality, right? Because they're now more and more in their etheric world. They're transitioning over to the etheric world. And you see things differently from the etheric world. My wife is having a loved one who's, a parent who's in the dying process. And she was in the hospital and is, got various, terminal things going on. And my wife was talking to the nurse, and, her mom said that she was talking to her parents, her dead parents. And one of the nurses said, yeah, well, that shows then that means the end is near. People start seeing dead relatives and, is that somebody, you guys might have experiences with this, right? Your parents dying and, them all of a sudden connecting with, the dead souls of the loved ones, right? They're connecting with the souls and helping them transition, what's happening. You have these family of souls and people, that, oftentimes a person dies and then their spouse dies a couple months later. You're in this together and then you don't want to be here alone, right? So it's hard to, keep on going after your spouse your life partner has passed away or whatever. If you have a long marriage, someone you're really close to. And so there's all these things, right? And it's confusing. And the world of the spirit is, again, it's not as verifiable. So like I said, I didn't look at the heartfulness thing. I haven't looked at the heartfulness thing in about 4 months. I don't remember the last time. And only because there's this guy, this dodgy truther guy, who's a preceptor. In the Sabotage system, there's preceptors who are a part of what people would think of like a priest class or a clergy. But it's not really like that because they're just volunteers. People go over to their house, right? So as a preceptor, someone would come over to my house, and I had this, these chairs set up. Some people sit on the floor, but, most people aren't really capable of that anymore. Younger people. But even younger people today, sitting in cross-leg position for, 30 minutes or an hour or whatever is just not doable. I tried to do it, and, I couldn't do it. At age 29, when I started meditating. And over the years, I tried to work on it, I stretched, and I did things. But I just couldn't sit that long on the floor, right? And you're supposed to be comfortable so that the body doesn't interfere. Because it's hard to meditate when you're in physical pain. You just, your body distracts you and it pulls you out of the meditation. So in the Sabotage system, you're supposed to, there's an idea of asana, which is posture, right? Which is a part of the Hatha yoga. The asanas, the various asanas. And so, I sit up these chairs and a person would come over and they would get these individual sittings where you would clean their heart and transmission would flow through you. And, you would do this because it benefited you as a preceptor and you wanted to contribute to the mission. And then people got into their egos and, it's all the same kind of thing with anything like that. But, it wasn't a position of you're a preacher or something. It's a position of service. I would go over people's houses and you get these sittings, these individual sittings, right? And so this guy's a senior preceptor, and he just didn't buy into Dodgy's bullshit. Dodgy comes from a caste, and his last name's Patel, Kamish Patel, and there's a saying, hotel, motel, petel, but he comes from the Gujarati part of the country, where there's a lot of light-skinned sort of guy. There's people who are maybe more interacting with the British. These cities where there's lots of British, and there's a little bit lighter skin, there's British People of the north have lighter skin, and also it's the weather's there's more of a winter there. It's less, whatever it is, right? There's a lot of Muslim people there. There's a lot of people who are into money, more so like these castes who are more business oriented. And Kamlesh is part of that. And when he became the master of the system, a lot of people just rejected him because of his caste. But then he started doing stupid shit, right? So this guy, the dodgy truther, a bunch of people there they really dislike Kamlesh, and they hate, he's always sending me things. And other than that, I don't think about heartfulness at all. I don't want to. There's nothing for me to look at, right? But he sent me this clip, and it involved Dodgy's son. And at this gathering, this Basant gathering that happened now, it was February 1st and 2nd, and 3rd, and in India it's half a day earlier. So 7 days to February 9th, Sunday, February 9th. So about a week ago or so. And this guy, his son, is indicted, is being investigated by the SEC for fraud. Because Kamlesh had owned these pharmacies. He owned 7 pharmacies in New York. He lived in Long Island. And his sons were, born as American citizens. They were born here. I think they're both American citizens. And his one son was the CEO of a company that they put together called Medley Pharmacy, which was during the COVID time where they were going to combine with other pharmacies and provide delivery services for pharmaceutical drugs. And the company started off kind of great because of people not being able to leave their house during the lockdown. And it was doing well, it was expanding. And they got $170 million of investor money. But they did it by fudging the books, by making it look like the pharmacy was doing better than it is, to inflate the value, like in Shark Tank where they do a company evaluation of the, how you value the company. So if you're going to buy a percentage of it, you have to value the company as something. And the company was overvalued because they did fraud. And it went bankrupt, and the 2 sons fled to India to be with their dad. They left their home in Long Island, and now they're all in India. And his son, who's, just in September, the SEC put out this filing with his name on it that they're looking to prosecute this guy for fraud, and they're not returning to America. I don't even know what's going on with all that shit. But he gets up and he tells everybody that they're releasing a book, and with Dodgy was giving this medium sittings, this woman, Madame Helene, who they call Mother in France, right? So every Monday he gave her these sittings. And there was all these things that he said that were contradictory to the system knowledge that's out there, and things that he was saying himself, within this brief statement. And so what he said was that this woman, who had poor health all the messages, a lot of the messages where Babaji's addressing her, she's talking about her physical pain and her health and how weak she is and how she wished she could go out and travel and go to the ashrams and participate in these gatherings and things and, other things. She was just stuck in this apartment connecting with disembodied souls, right? So there was some advantage to that, but also she was wanting to have some, material life things. And she was just suffering, oftentimes weak. And the connecting and writing down these messages took a lot out of her. She could only do 1 or 2 a day, right? There's times that she did a lot, but then, in the beginning, it took her time to get into it. The messages were once every couple weeks. And then she started to do them daily, maybe 1 or 2 a day, but they would weaken her. They would, it takes a lot of energy for something like that, right? Some physical energy. And so, but also being sick, it helps you, like I said, penetrate to the etheric world when you're dying and you're sick. And I had this experience myself. I got real sick and I couldn't eat. I was fasting basically. And I had these experiences reading these messages and connecting to the world of the spirit. It's just, you have these times where you have a deeper connection, and oftentimes your physical body is is, when you're weak and things like this, it makes it easier. Of course, when you're dying, it's, your soul's leaving your body, and so it's connecting with the etheric world. But his son, Daji's son, says that they decided to have Kamlesh, and Master Charji was still alive, and so he was the living master. But they decided to have Kamlesh in India give her sittings every Monday in France. Now, he had been nominated to be Charji's successor. And so that seems very suspect, that they would have Daji do this work when Charji was alive, that they would have him give sittings. And they said he gave sittings every Monday. And so what he said was that her health wasn't very good, and the preceptor couldn't come to her to give her these sittings. So, a French preceptor. So Daji volunteered to give the sittings, which seemed very suspect, because in these writings, Babaji's constantly doing work on her. There's a time like a soul, some disembodied, higher developed soul comes and is just like intercommuning with her for like 3 months, right? And working on her spiritual self, like all these things. And so they're doing all this work from the etheric world on her. And occasionally she would get some kind of spiritual work from, I don't know about the preceptor or not, right? But she was, connected through this mediumship on a deep level. And, it's the same when Babaji, when Lalaji, the first master of the system, passed away. Babaji wasn't ready to be the master. He's still like in his 20s. And for 13 years, Babaji would intercommune with him and do spiritual work. And this was similar to that. And so he didn't need a lot of preceptor or, these type of things, because he was connecting directly to the source. So, that seems very questionable. And also, the sittings themselves do not help you with your health, right? They're not supposed to help you with your health. This is not a system where it's to make your life better. In fact, oftentimes it's the opposite, where your suffering helps you on your spiritual life. So suffering, miseries as divine blessings is one of the maxims, that you have these miseries and they're divine blessings because they help you spiritually. And so there are things that benefit you, like lack of, when you get these sittings, it helps reduce your stress level, and it helps you with pain tolerance. And so both of those things, when you have a lot of stress, everyone knows, cortisol is produced, all the things that go on when you're stressed out, which have health effects. Everyone knows the effects of stress. And so it helps reduce stress, it helps to relax, and it helps to clean some scars and minimize them. And many of these samskaras would be burned off in the form of poor health or, accidents or something, right? So it does help in that way. But it's not designed for that. It's not a system that wants you to have optimal health. The meditations are there to help you to connect to God, right? And so he said Daji gave her these sittings for 3 to 4 years. So from 2011 to 2014 or so, until her health was good, right? So that her health had gotten better, isn't the goal. And he said that Daji put a chair in front of him to give the sitting. So he would sit and face the chair like he was giving her a sitting in a chair. And the son said he kind of made fun of it, but then would meditate with him while he was giving the sitting. So he would somehow be part of it, which was weird. And that Daji was very precise on the timing. He would give the sittings at 10 p.m. at night, and she would receive him at 2 in the afternoon in France. But then he said sometimes Daji was with Charji, and he would give the sitting to her with his eyes open, without the chairs. And he tried to keep this timing. But then he said when he couldn't do it at that time, he would do the sitting with the idea that it would reach her in the time that she was meditating, right? Which is something that all long-distance sittings were there to have, right? Like, we already have that. And so there was no reason to put the chair, and there was no reason to do it at a specific time. You would just give the sitting. This was established years and years ago when some person was wanting to test Babaji and test him and test the validity of the sittings. So Babaji said, okay, you sit at this time and I'll sit with you. While Babaji was in Shahjahanpur, the other guy was in New Delhi or some other city, right? And so the guy sat at a different time just to test Babaji. And he received the sitting. And he explained this to Babaji. He said, how did it work? And he said, well, the sittings are not for time and space. We have all these sittings now that I've done for the Gratefulness meditation. And, we all meditate together on Sunday, but at different times, different time zones. People wake up at different times, Sunday morning. And it just works that way. It's always worked that way. So putting a chair there was silly, but then he didn't need the chair, at other times. And doing it at the same time as the woman, as the medium, wasn't important either, because, like he was a stickler for that. But you either have faith in the system or you don't. And if you have faith in the system, then you don't have to do it because there's no time and space. The transmission is God's love, which is not, it doesn't bow to the laws of either time or space. There's no distance where the love can, it's not operating on physical distance. So you could be halfway around the world or you could be 5 feet from the person, and it doesn't make a difference, right? Only from your physical, experience. Your physical experience of being in an atmosphere at the preceptor's house and some of these other things were helpful. And, having the experience of the person with you, it's harder to connect, mentally to somebody's soul that's some distance away. But the distance doesn't matter to the sitting itself, right? And so there's a lot of contradictories already in his statement. And what this is about is he was going to drop this book called The Symphony of Love. And so you have this his son who's being accused of fraud in America, who was an American citizen who's hiding out in India. The Indians have this thing called a person of Indian descent or Indian background or something like that as a category for a visa. And so that's a person who is Indian but is a citizen of some other country. And you can come back to the country in these visas, but you're not considered a citizen of India. You don't have to go through the same visa process as somebody coming from America who isn't Indian. So you have to have, like, your parents were Indian or grandparents or whatever. And so, but you're not a citizen, and his kids are there now. And I don't think they can return to America, especially this son, because he would probably end up going to jail or something. I don't know exactly what they're doing, because they defrauded people of $170 million. And people will kill you for that shit, right? Like these people who have that kind of money, who are investors, who are pretty pissed off by this thing that the SEC has filed. So this guy gets up. There's no sense of shame that this, and also the failure of the business, the Indian culture. There was this woman from Australia, I was talking about how, there was this lack of accountability and people, don't like to admit they're wrong. And this woman said that she dated an Indian guy, and she said, the culture is pressures you so much about how to save face, that you want to save face, that it made it impossible for her to have these dialogues, where the guy wouldn't admit to things, right? They just won't admit to things because they don't want to bring shame on their family and all these things. I mean, it's just very, entrenched. It's very heavy, the enmeshment within the families there, right? And that you don't want to embarrass your family and bring shame on your family and the rest of these things. But he's up there talking about this thing, with this knowledge that some of these people have, like some of us know this guy's accused of committing fraud on a large scale, right? And then there's all the shit that Dodgy's pulled, the Brighter Mind scam and these other things, right? And so then he goes into this idea that after Dodgy would give her these sittings, she would give him personalized messages. And he said the whole divine hierarchy was there, all these masters that are, part of the system, which includes, this guy Swami Vivekananda and Jesus and, Buddha and some of these, all these disembodied souls they're supposedly a part of the Sabotage meditation. And they were all there for these sittings. And he talked about how great the sittings were, Dodgy was. But we've never heard any of this before. No one's ever said anything. And people would have been around him, would have known. Like there's no backing of this story. And she passed away in 2018, And he said he stopped giving her sittings after 4 years from 2011, so 2014, 15, when Chargy passed away. And supposedly she gave him a message every Monday after these sittings. And there's a whole book of them, but they've never been pre-released. And the messages come from Lalaji, Babaji, Chargy's spiritual entity. Chargy used to get some of these messages from Chargy's soul. It was called SE, spiritual entity. And Daji's spiritual entity, he gave messages to himself through her. And this guy, Swami Vivekananda, who was, wasn't one of the masters, but he was a previous saint and one of the other, the Ramakrishna. He's been a part of the Sajmark system. He gives a lot of the messages, not a lot, but a lot compared to other, there's these various messages from these various souls that come through. And there's, a few of them, 10 from this person, 10 from, Chargy's mom, Chargy's wife who had passed away, things like that, right? Some, few messages here or there. And there's a whole book of them. But she had poor health, and she only give one message a day, and these messages have been hidden away for 10 years. But there's a team of people, because she was a French woman who wrote down the messages in French, and there was a team of translators. She had a whole group of people there, like her whole group. They refer to her as mother, but he's calling her mama, because that's how they would say it in India, right? But like they said mother in French. And this team of people would have known about the messages. Like there's no indication that Daji got these messages. And his son's talking about how they were praising Daji in these messages and the love that they were showing for him. And I'm sure some of the messages are going to throw Chargy under the bus. Like I know they've just made these things up, right? Like everything that he said sounds sketch. Like it's just completely fucked up. Like the other thing is that her poor health was important for her to do her job. And like I said earlier, because it's just, it's something that makes it easier for you to get into that space. And there is this message from this guy called the Foreigner. So there is these realms of, existence. And this guy, the Foreigner, was from a realm where he had to come back down and like pass through a barrier to interact on this realm, like some higher developed being that is in some etheric realm, right? That had to, come through something to access, like there's souls that access the planets, the physical universe, and are working on the physical universe and this level of existence. And they're disembodied souls of a higher nature. And then they can graduate and go beyond this realm, right? And this being called the Foreigner comes back in. So it's this really highly developed soul. And so I think the soul gave a couple of messages, but this one was directed at the medium. And this is from Sunday, July 27th, 2002, 11 a.m. And it says, I can hear you. You are not unknown to us. Our contact will not go any further. We cannot disturb you in the work you are doing. Your divine God would not appreciate it. You are serving a beautiful way, which will go far in time. And she says, can you cure me or help me with my health? And he says, we cannot interfere in your work. You will feel better today, is what we do offer you as an answer to your requests. We bless you. We cannot interfere with the work of your master. We feel better today. You will feel better today, is what we do offer to do you as an answer to your request. We bless you. There's another message where he said, we could create some circumstance where you could dance around and just, be free of all these physical ailments. And sign the Foreigner, right? So, this idea that Daji was giving her these sittings is silly. There's an established, these are just some of the things I know about. Like there's other references to this, where Babaji says, to her, we are not compassionate about your suffering, but it's a real blessing and it helps you do this work, right? And so the whole thing with Daji saying that, and then all the things he said earlier, about, all the things that his son said earlier about the, the messages and him sitting at a certain time, but then other times he didn't because he couldn't, and like the whole thing is just it's just full of inconsistencies. But they've had these messages that no one's heard about, and that they've never been out there. That there's these messages specifically sent to Dodgy, and he's been holding on to these things, and they're enough to make a whole book. And so he's compromised. I mean, he already had compromised these whispers messages that two gatherings ago. It's been 10 years since Chargy passed away. And so there was never any, these messages are all published in order. And many of the messages came on Mondays. So some of these messages that were on Mondays, which he would have had to give Dodgy a separate message just for himself. And that they would be, withheld until the time where they wanted to glorify him, right? And make it sound like he was, supported by these divine beings, when he's turned into a complete piece of shit, and his son's got criminal charges in America, and Dodgy's got involved with all these scams, and the mission's falling apart. And then he pulls out this book that's supposed to validate him and, praise him as a person. It's just, it's just so sketch, right? Especially when 2 years ago, he made this claim he got a message from Babaji saying combine the gatherings, and then it didn't happen. Like, he completely failed, because it never would have happened, right? It was just silly. This idea was something that couldn't happen. And so, like, this is just classic, the whole thing is just falling apart. When things cater to smart people, evolves people, people have a standard. When you're dealing with people who can see through childish little lies and inconsistencies, you're dealing with intelligent people and evolved souls, ones on a higher level of consciousness, which this mission used to have lots of those people, spiritual people. And, they can learn how to read people. I mean, that's what you do as a preceptor and as a spiritual person. You can see people lying to you. You understand these things better because you've internalized your existence. And when you're introverted, you're aware of things that other people do because you're aware of your own stuff and things like that, right? And when the lies get so ridiculous and the inconsistencies are so glaring, which has happened over and over since Dodgy's I think he's got some kind of mental difficulties. And they make these silly little claims, right? And so when you're talking about something where it's channeled messages, you can't throw doubt. Like, it wrecks all of them. Not for me, because I've had, validation of the legitimacy of these messages, pre-Dodgy taking over. But now that he has, everything becomes suspect. It can't be any other way, right? I've said this before. It's just like with all this other stuff with Trump, right? It's RFK Jr. RFK Jr. had, a good grasp on various truther stuff to do with the medical community and to do with the environment and some of these things. He's a mainstream person. But then he had this horrible position on Israel and the Palestinian people that was just, everyone knew was bullshit, right? And Trump doing this thing with Israel and the Gaza Strip, where he wants to take it over. I mean, just, it shows you that he's a liar, and all the stuff that he's been saying to cultivate a relationship and pretend that he's some sort of a truther in these things, right? And so this is the same thing with that kind of thing, where it just throws the whole system. I mean, if you're a person doing it, like this is why I left years ago, and why I don't pay attention, because it just makes me, irritated and sometimes even angry how bad it's become, like how embarrassing it is, right? So that's why I don't tune into it. Like, if somebody sends me something like this guy, and I wanted to see it because I was aware of his son. His son, in September, they wrote this, the SEC wrote down this indictment, but the family has not gone back to America, so there's no way to, they're all hiding out in India, so I don't know if there's any kind of extradition. It's, financial crimes are handled differently, right? Because it's, rich people stealing from rich people. If a company rips off its investors, right? Remember that girl, Elizabeth, whatever her name was, they made a Netflix show on it, or a Hulu show, or one of those, online streaming services. And it was supposedly invented a way to do blood tests where they could take only a drop of blood and get all these other results. And it never worked. They never were able to do it. And she defrauded all these investors and fudged the books and fake things. And now she can never run a company, and she owes all this money, and she did jail time. Whatever her name, Elizabeth, whatever it was. And so, this is a similar type of thing. But, this family's hiding out there. And so I wanted to see his son. His son is all of a sudden being groomed for something, maybe his successor or some shit like that, right? And so somebody's considered a criminal in America, and they're rolling him out there, and there's no sense of shame or embarrassment or we have to explain this, right? They haven't, as far as I know, made a statement about it, right? People know about it. Some of the people do the system, whatever it is. And so, the system has been so great for me, and I had so much hope for it for other people and humanity. And now it's just turned into an absolute joke. Okay, so let me move on to my other stuff I have to do today. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing to the apocalypse. And the ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.